Les Martyrs is surprising to those particularly who may be opera goers, have been to an opera before, or even more so used to listen to bel canto operas by Donizetti. This is very different.
It's very much grand opera. It's about as big and epic as it gets.
There are some bits which are extraordinary music, where it's like the bottom just drops out of it. You think, what is this?
It's kind of Verdi in its earliest kind of form, if you like, and a lot of the phrases sound a little bit odd, in a nice way.
It's such an unusual piece. I mean, I think people that turn up and think, oh, Donizetti, are going to be a bit surprised, because it's not just like Donizetti. It's like Berlioz or something in places.
I'm sure when people hear this and get to see it live or hear it on disc, it will just, about every few minutes they'll be, huh, this is Donizetti? Really? Wow, I didn't know he was such a revolutionary composer.
Donizetti's great works in this line of operas are missing from the general public's appreciation of what happened in Paris. And if we can do something in these days to bring this piece alive, I think it could be fantastic. It could be so arresting, so exciting.
Opera Rara's unique purpose is to recover, restore, recreate and record neglected operatic masterpieces of the 19th century. Donizetti's Les Martyrs is one such opera. Written on a grand scale for Paris, it has not received a public performance in London for over 150 years. Sir Mark Elder and the creative team 3 years ago recognized that here was an opportunity to present a neglected masterpiece to the public in Opera Rara's unique style of performance and recording, and for its permanent restoration to the operatic repertory in the form of recording and digital downloads.
The possibility of doing a new critical edition of this was a kind of synergy between Opera Rara and Ricordi, in the sense that if Ricordi were going to do an edition of this, they wanted to be sure that there was going to be a really first-rate performance to back it up. So this is like a marriage made in heaven for the editors and the performers.
From beginning to end, the identification, the creation of the score, the rehearsal of the work, the performance, recording, archiving, and presentation in indelible digital form means that Opera Rara's unique purpose has been fulfilled. Its donors and funders, who recognize this unique purpose, have been vindicated.
So I'm co-general editor of the Donizetti edition, and that means that I supervised Flora Willson's edition of Les Martyrs, went through it after she'd made her initial pass through the score, and sort of made sure everything was as right as we can get it.
I am a scholar who's interested in Italian opera in Paris, above all, in the 19th century. And so this rang so many bells for me. And it just seemed like a perfect opportunity to sort of get involved in the pointy end, if you like, of opera production, of actually getting to sort of make a difference to what's performed on stage.
The main source material for Les Martyrs is a very complicated document, which is basically Donizetti's autograph score, his handwritten score of the entire opera. But as this is based on an earlier Italian opera, when he was copying the orchestral parts from his earlier opera, he got a copyist to do that. So when you look at this orchestral score, this autograph score, it's really complicated because there are two hands in it, and deciphering which precisely is Donizetti's is sometimes really difficult.
So the state the opera was in before I got there was essentially a 19th century score of Les Martyrs, and also a critical edition that already existed of Poliuto, the Italian opera that the French opera is then based on in part.
Poliuto was one of the most unfortunate stories in Donizetti's life. He wrote this opera for Naples, which was a very strictly controlled environment, and the opera went through the censors, first of all, with a few problems, but got through to the dress rehearsal, and then at that stage it was rejected probably by the king. Donizetti never quite worked out what it was, but it was certainly something to do with the religious subject matter. So there he was, left with a completely rehearsed, completely finished opera that was then banned. He's got one eye on Paris at that stage. He's very keen on transferring to Paris if he can. He gets a commission from the Paris Opera, and then he thinks, yeah, great, what we'll do is make Poliuto into a Parisian grand opera, and I've got my commission sorted out.
Now, the running of the Paris Opera was always tricky, and throughout the 19th century, many composers suffered at its hands. It was a big theatre. It had enormous scenic constructions, effects, machinery on the stage. The audience expected this vast spectacle. And he had to enlarge what was a 3-act opera in Italy into a 4-act opera for Paris.
Grand opera in Paris at this period is a very special beast. Grand means grand in the English sense, but it also means big in French, and these operas are usually 4 or 5 long acts, have huge scenic marvels, have enormous numbers of people involved in them, so it's a very particular genre which Donizetti had to adapt his Italian opera to suit.
The cast for this opera, I think, is quite wonderful because all the people fit their roles so well. The English bass, Brindley Sherratt, for instance, has the perfect noble sound for the role of the father, Felix.
He's very much a religious zealot. It's not that he's very for his gods, the Roman gods, and completely and utterly against the new Christians. And he makes it his purpose in life to destroy them utterly. At the end, when they're being fed to the lions, he has to go through what must be the worst thing for any father, which is to see his own daughter processing out with the other Christians, ready to go to the lions.
One of the extraordinary things about the Paris Opera was that it had a stable of superstar singers. And if you were a sensible composer, which Donizetti was, then you would write tailoring your parts to those particular singers. That was very, very important aspect of it. So you have certain kinds of sopranos, certain kinds of basses, and also most important probably at this stage, a certain kind of emerging tenor, a new kind of voice, a more forceful, heroic voice, which had been, in a sense, created by the French Grand Opera.
Michael Spyres has just the right sort of voice and technique to sing the very demanding role of Poliuto that was written for Dupré, the famous French tenor who replaced Nourri at the Paris Opera.
It's unlike anything else I've ever seen. It has written high E naturals in it and quite a few C sharps and Ds.
These very high notes that Dupré was so famous for are extraordinary kind of mixture of sounds. They're not like the high C that we're used to from Pavarotti and other modern tenors. They're 2 or 3 notes above that, and they have a kind of mixed quality, which seems like they're on the edge of falsetto, but they're also really authentically produced notes in all sorts of ways. It's an extraordinary sound.
People who come and hear the performance will realise that this was tailor-made for Dupré. Not such a low roll, but suddenly and brilliantly high, going right up above the stave in a way that very few singers can do.
It's one of the craziest roles ever written, I believe, but since I'm a little crazy myself, I think I'm a good fit for it, so.
I sing the role of Niak, which is the secondary tenor part. I am like the primo Christian, the Christian leader who Poliuto kind of confides in. I'm his friend and I'm offering him Christian guidance throughout and keeping him strong for God.
The longest role is the female role, the one female role, Paulina, which is going to be sung by Joyce El-Khoury, who was so dramatic and startling in Belisario 2 or 3 years ago.
We see her at the beginning of the opera. She's very tormented by the memory of her lover, whom she believes was killed in battle. Of course, this is 2 years later, and she is now married to Poliuto. Of course, later on, she discovers that Sévère is in fact still alive, and it throws a little bit of, you know, a little bit of drama and everything. Yeah, so she goes through a huge journey, not only with her personal relationships, but also with her faith. She's a very strong woman. She is not apologetic. She's not wimpy. She believes what she believes. She's not ashamed of it. She will defend her rights and her beliefs, and she is not at all intimidated by any of these men. She's one of them, and I love her for it.
the characters in the drama need very distinctive voice types, and this we've managed to find. David Kempster has just the right voice for Sévère, the baritone part. Clive Bailey has a lower placed voice than Brinkley Sherritt, and so is perfect for the high priest, Callisthène, just to provide a contrast in the sound.
Well, I play Callisthène, the high priest of Jupiter, and he's the sort of implacable priest who wants to get every Christian he possibly can and send them to the lions, basically.
I play the character of Sévère, who is a Roman general. I've had Paulina's hand in marriage promised to me by Felix. I go away to war, to battle. I come back full of expectation to see Paulina after all that time. I sing it. It's a beautiful aria saying that, you know, the only thing that has kept me going in the darkest of times was the fact that I would see Paulina again. Paulina turns up. I see her eventually, and she tells me that she has remarried.
Ah, okay.
Yes.
Éteint.
No,
Okay.
éteint, était.
Éteint. Ah,
It's not
éteint.
nasal.
Ah, okay, it's not nasal.
Because the verbal ending
Éteint.
is AIS,
Éteint.
AIT,
Mhm.
AIENT. They are all-
My role is to deal with the language, to ensure first and foremost that the singers are actually singing the basic stuff, which is the right vowels. And that's really the tip of the iceberg. And after that, it's really making sure they, once they're accurate, we concentrate on using the text to portray emotion with the music.
When you first pick up a new score, it's always a challenge to try and find out how you make something work vocally for you and how you make it work dramatically at the same time. And this has been a really interesting piece for me because, you know, believe it or not, in 20 years I've never sung an opera in French. I've done a lot in Italian, a lot in Czech, a lot in Russian, a lot in German, never in French. So that's been a new kind of challenge.
More than any of the four languages we're singing most of the time, it's the one I don't immediately flick into. I have to really work at it, think about it, and have lots of coaching.
So I have to guide them through that and lead them towards being able to choose the words to stress, knowing when to be lazy with a consonant, lazy inverted comma, and then knowing when to really use an upbeat or a strong consonant to portray again an emotion, an important word.
A lot of singers get a bit scared of singing in French, I think, but maybe it's because I've done quite a bit of it recently. I've sort of got into it. I think it's if you go for the language itself and forget a bit about the singing, and eventually the two meld together.
Yeah, this is a really interesting moment in Donizetti's career where he is transitioning between being a composer of Italian operas to being an Italian composer who also produces French works.
He was really, truly a master at language, and you can tell because the way that he wrote the recits and the dramas and the pauses that he put within the words, they're fantastic. I think it's revolutionary.
Yes, some of the difficulties and some of the writing, of course, is very energetic, very fast, lots of semi-quavers, and that is definitely a challenge for singers.
You know, to have a French coach on site and on the end of the phone as well in rehearsal is a huge benefit to all of us, I'm sure.
She has saved my neck many times over the last 20 years.
My job, of course, is to make them all fit together, all have the same idea about the piece, to approach it in the same way, to do the French with power and freshness, supported by my great friend and colleague, Florence, and to bring it to life, to make its epic qualities contrast with the tenderness and the romance of the intimate passages.
For me, it's the first time that I'm working with Sir Mark, And it's extraordinary because he has a passion for putting text and music together as one thing, one motivating the other. And it's wonderful for me.
He's really a maestro. There's not many people around that are still of his caliber, because no matter what, he knows every single thing about the music. He knows the French language, and he knows Donizetti in and out, and you can't get away with anything. No matter what, you have to do everything for a reason, and that's what makes his recording and his knowledge of the music so important.
We've had our ups and downs, but actually that really helps because I relax totally with him now. I know him and he knows what I can do and what I can't do, so it's a good relationship.
He does know how to be a proper maestro.
No, thank you. This was fantastic. Such a great help. Just be able to watch you and just really helps for someone who knows how to conduct singers.
One of the great joys of doing these projects with Opera Rara is, if I may say it this way, one knows that the production will never happen. And that my fantasy, my curiosity about how far we can take this project will depend on the imagination of the singers being really engaged. I've been thinking about it for 2 years, thinking about how each act has to be constructed so that it feels like one piece of music. And if one day we start in the middle of an act, I have to think, now where are we coming from? What will we have just done? And how will it affect what we do now? And to make sure that then when we do the first part, having done the second part already, I know what I'm going towards, as it were. And I have to help the singers remember their parts and the journey that their parts make through the score. And that's fun. I mean, it's really interesting because it involves one in being very creative and not just being tied to the reading, as it were, of the score, but thinking all the time, what is the drama? What's actually the nub of this particular scene, whether it's a big one or a little one? And the idea of the development of the drama has been something that has been with me for many, many, many years. And it's one of the things that made me want to work in the theatre in the first place. How music can express the psychology of the inner life of the characters.
Before recording a scene, I have to go over everything that my character has gone through before that moment. And that's how I get the psychology behind what's in the scene. And, you know, because we've rehearsed it with such detail, we have worked in the expression and the feeling that we want from every phrase we sing.
What we have to do as singers, when we haven't done a staged performance of the work and we're just coming to record it, is to think so much about the text and all the subtext and everything else that goes behind it. And then you have to get a handle of the character through the score on your own terms.
But it usually takes you about half an hour to get into the groove. There's a kind of first sing through, there's a first look at it, and then it takes you a while just to get into the mood. And but thankfully recording engineers understand that.
The difficult thing about a studio recording is the pacing of it, because the music, and especially this character, is so dramatic. But you have to remember that you're going to be recording for a good 7 days, and you're going to have to be repeating these really difficult lines over and over and over again. And so conservation of energy and concentration of what you need to do at the task at hand it's quite draining. So at the end of the day, you feel like you've really done a workout.
Dieu puissant, Dieu puissant.
first and foremost making sure that we get the best out of everyone and that we cover everything to the best of their abilities, to our abilities, that we can encourage them if necessary, coax them, a certain amount of criticism when necessary, and make sure that everything is there for the recording and it's inspired and hopefully crackling without too much editing.
So during the sessions themselves, I'm sort of like an extra pair of ears, so I listen for Jeremy and for Mark and do all like similar things, so we're trying to get everything accurate in tune, but also get like the sweep of the piece. But also I've been involved like from the beginning when we were starting to think about the piece and constructing a schedule for everybody to record it without killing themselves, basically.
This particular schedule has been very well planned to give singers, if they're doing their main aria, their big scene cabaletta, then you wouldn't be doing another one the next day. It's very well planned because fatigue is a big factor with recording. You have to turn up in good shape.
But also what is tiring, when we'll be recording it, is trying to keep your concentration and your line of thought going. You might be doing stuff for the 30th, 40th time. Please God, no. But if you were, then you've got to find the freshness that you had, the first time you did it.
I do enjoy the recording process. I like breaking things apart. And when I study a role, in fact, that's what I do. And so in a recording session, when we take something apart and put it back together and focus on just one bar or one phrase, that's what I like to do in my practice studio anyway.
It is quite a challenge, though, because every one of us keep having to put our arms down and just like calm down and stay in the character and realize that the voice should be doing the work and not our whole bodies and everything. So it's been a bit of a challenge doing that. So.
The fact that the harps are here is so unexpected and so extraordinary. Yes. And it's almost impossible to get all their notes out. Yeah, but one just wants to be aware that they're beavering away. Yeah. I just wonder whether, I don't think they can play louder.
Is that a bit, do you want it more?
Yes, I want it a little bit more, okay. Just without it seeming and contrast.
It's interesting. We listen, don't we, and comment as and when we think things are necessary. But sometimes, he thinks along similar lines, and always, give him a chance to say things first. But then, make suggestions for improvements. Things to do with balance, things to do with texture, occasionally to do with tempo, expression. Something that I'm always very keen on in studio recordings is to get people to exaggerate a little bit more, because you have not got the eye there. You can't actually see what's going on.
Yeah.
So you want people who their ears to be led, really.
Yes.
They're just listening to it. And I think that's very important, and I think these singers are very good at just conveying the drama of the piece. But Mark's second to none in sort of explaining it to the orchestra so that they're there as well. And this orchestra is marvellous. They're so fired up by the whole thing, and Mark's little synopses and so forth. And they've been doing this for the last week or so, and they're all still really keen as mustard on the whole thing, which is great.
Over the last 25 years, the OAE and I have done a number of operatic projects. And I think for the orchestra to develop their awareness of Italian and French opera is very, very exciting, because it's such a contrast for them with their symphonic work that they do right from Bach to Haydn to Mozart to Beethoven, through. And what I enjoy so much is how their sound and their attitude towards the music can create something fresh. The instruments themselves have, of course, very distinctive colours, but it's also the way we can make the sound world of the opera dance and never sit down, and never be too prosaic, but always jumping with brilliance and tenderness.
The orchestra of the Paris Opéra was essentially the best in the world at this time. They had the longest rehearsals, they were the best funded, they were the orchestra to write for, and critics in Paris expected the composers to use them, if you like, to provide them with interesting music to play. And I think Donizetti really took up that challenge with real sort of excitement.
Well, Opera Rara needs its own chorus. And we've founded the idea that it should have one named after Opera Rara, and that it can be different sizes and different strengths depending on the nature of the music. Our last production together, for instance, was an unknown Offenbach, a romantic comedy. And we didn't need weight of sound there, we needed lightness and skill. Now for this, we need both. We need brilliance and fast text and movement, but also a certain statuesque and ceremonial colour in the chorus. And the music that Donizetti has written for the chorus is so imaginative, so varied, that I'm sure that will be a very major contribution to the success.
This score here is the first printed score of Donizetti's Les Martyrs, and it was done at huge speed, just about at the moment when the first performance happened. So it's really a record of what happened at the first performance. In this sense, it's quite different from what we've got, in the sense that we went back to the composer's autograph, and a lot of the things that were cut out during the late stage of rehearsals are things that we've managed to put back into the score now.
19th century editors had a really very different taste in what music should sort of look like on the page compared to today. And so there were all sorts of additions that they'd made, changes they'd made to what Donizetti would have wanted, we assume. And so part of it was taking that out. Part of the job is then actually looking at Donizetti's manuscript for Les Martyrs, which looks something like this, which is quite difficult to make out, if you can see.
I think because it was done at such speed, it's full of mistakes. I mean, unbelievable things that are got wrong. I don't know how they managed to perform with this as a basis.
These were very, very long pieces. They had a lot of rehearsal time, but towards the end, things always got rushed. And in the end, people would count up. I mean, it's like today, people would count up how long the whole thing was going to take, and they'd find it was still too long. And the composer would be told, you must cut some more, you must cut more. And so there are various different kinds of cuts that you come across in Donizetti's manuscript. There are places where he has thoroughly scribbled out. He's done a sort of real, cross-hatching all over a page. And you sort of think, yep, he probably didn't want that to be performed. There are other places where it's much more of a grey area, where there might, for instance, just be a single line through it, or where there's no line through it at all, and he's just written cut at the top of the page.
Well, in certain cases, we've opened up those cuts and we're performing what was lost. In other words, we're performing things in this edition which have never ever been heard before outside rehearsals of the opera, which is really fascinating.
Fantastic. Thank you very much indeed, everyone. That's a beautiful way to end. Wonderful.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you so much.
It's been a huge journey to make together in such a short time. And I've been so thrilled at the speed with which you have tried to absorb this very unfamiliar music. And I'm very excited that at last we're going to get a chance to do it for a public. Many, many people have bought tickets. Some haven't, but they're coming. Okay, so bravo, rest well tomorrow. Thank you. Well, I have very mixed emotions, you know, sadness, because it's finished. And that this process is a process that I have been anticipating for 2 years, at least 2.5 years. And I've been building up to how we might make this effective. And I never thought that we would do it in a church I'd never been in before. And I never thought that there would be so much excitement and juice from hearing the orchestra play. It is a very, very remarkable score. And nothing that I think Donizetti ever said about it himself gives anybody the idea that he has composed something so remarkably individual, so brave, so colourful, so emotionally centred. It is, after all, a very strong story, straight from a Corneille play that is still studied in France. It has 6 roles, all of which are wonderfully characterful, demanding, challenging, and I think the whole edifice of this great work is now ready to be shared with a bigger public. We have to make a very long journey in a very short time. If we were doing this, you know, for instance, at Covent Garden, in a new production, we would be working with a director. We would know that the first night was 5 or 6 weeks away, and that the gradual, like the maturing of a good Burgundy, you know, you've got to do it gradually and don't rush at it. You just have to be clear with your imagination. You have to say very specific things directly to the singers and give them every support, because what they're achieving is incredible.
What happens on Tuesday is that we perform it for the first time, and the singers and the orchestra have no idea what it feels like to go from the beginning to the end. So they're not prepared, really, except for educated guesswork in terms of stamina and how they're going to feel emotionally about the piece when they do it. So
and whether we'll sit there on Tuesday thinking, oh my God, I wish we were recording this,
yes,
because now this is one glorious sweep, and we wouldn't have had to make an edit for 20 minutes. You know?
It's really incredible, unbelievable that they're going to do this in such a short time. And I've been thinking about everything that this piece offers for a long time, and so I hope that my journey has been made before them and I can pull them into it, as it were, and then we go forward together.
It's very inspiring to work with a conductor who's so passionate about this music, and I think that the audience, and both in the festival hall and the listening audience when this comes out on CD, are going to be surprised at just what a wonderful piece this is.
I've done several projects where we've recorded and then done a concert, and the audience love it because in a way they get a little bit more than just a concert, than an oratorio, because there will be much more physicality, but they love the energy, extra energy that we have.
You can't strip away the acting. It's all there, in the face, in the body, in the voice. We can't separate the two, and they belong together. And so even though we're not in costumes and we're not under stage lights and we don't have much movement, we're still in character. That's for the concert and for the recording. So, ooh, it's exciting. So much going on. It's fantastic. Yeah.